Hey guys, Paul here. So today I'm going to be giving you some tips to get better at Yu-Gi-Oh! More specifically, these are some of the things that I used to improve at Yu-Gi-Oh! And so because of that, they won't necessarily work for everybody. These were also things that I did back in like 2000, maybe 8, 9, 10. That was kind of when I was getting into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And saw the most improvement in the game. Obviously, times have changed. Like the game works a lot differently now, so some of this stuff may or may not be applicable, or might be even easier because of different resources that are available. But yeah, also I should probably say that while I did see some moderate competitive success in this game, right? I've topped a few regionals, that sort of thing. I haven't like won a YCS. So if you want, maybe more deep, in-depth, improvement stuff, there are better resources for it. This is just like generality sort of things. So, yeah. The first thing is I liked reading articles a lot when I was first getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! That might have partly been just because I was so like interested in throwing myself into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! But I'm a reader. I really like reading. I loved reading deck guides and like also just thought pieces and strategy articles. So I'd like just spend all day reading on Pojo forums. Like pretty much any forum was fair game. Any topic, any question. I liked reading people's deck guides in there, but also just discussions, countered things, whatever. TCG Player, Duelist Grounds was another sort of forum that I would frequent a fair bit, and I feel like I might be forgetting one, but yeah, those are some of my favorite places to go. I just like to read about Yu-Gi-Oh! Because when I read about it, I was kind of able to visualize things and think about things without necessarily reading cards directly in front of me. And so that sometimes helped me to like separate the mental component from the gameplay component, if that makes any sense at all. Now, I know not everybody really like learns through just reading. In fact, some people don't really care to read at all. We are Yu-Gi-Oh players after all. But that is just something that was really helpful for me. So obviously that does still exist today. There are still a lot of really valuable articles on places like TCG Player. I don't know that we really have as many forums and stuff. I guess there are like Discord servers and Facebook groups that like people have where they sort of will specialize in different archetypes. I've heard that those can sometimes have like mixed results because, sometimes it's more like people discussing and then eventually arguing about like, how you're supposed to play a deck or whatever. But there could be some value to that. I just know that I was really big on reading, just in general. Okay, step two, or I say step, I guess number two was Netdeck, just Netdeck. This is something that I know, honestly, back in my day, I feel like such an old head, but back in my day, netdecking was really frowned upon, and it was like kind of one of these things where like people would be like, oh, if you're netdecking, you're not being original, you're not making your own thing, like you're copying from someone else, and this game's all about having originality and all that stuff. No, no, no. I think net decking is totally fine. I would strongly encourage it. I would also discourage you from, judging or, insulting somebody maybe because they net decked. Like, honestly, Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you just want to kind of get into it, I think that just getting a skeleton sort of recipe for a deck makes sense. You can play it and then just change it as you go, right? It's not really worth sitting here and like and this is for somebody who's new. It's not really worth sitting here and like figuring out how every single card works and interacts and try to like kind of create this formula for making the perfect deck. Like, don't get me wrong, there's like you can do that and it can work, and like once you've built your deck, that process kind of continues throughout. Like you are going to look at cards and kind of assess like, oh, this kind of worked, this kind of didn't, whatever, like maybe this ratio's better. There's lots of math involved and all that stuff, but I think that to just hit the ground running, just find the deck you want to play, net deck it, and like go, right? Don't waste any time worrying about what people have to say about that. And remember, this is meant to be changed later. It's just a starting point. You can net deck and then, oh, I don't know if I said what net decking was. It's just taking a deck list from online, like just something that somebody's, you can take a winning deck list from the last YCS or something that you found in some guide on the internet or whatever. But yeah, just net deck. Save yourself the trouble. Okay, anyways, next tip would be physicality. So this is something that I was pretty big on. I don't know if people care as much for it these days, but I really like to hold the cards in my hands. I don't have cards nearby. I'll pick those up. Anyways, yeah, I like to hold the cards in my hands. I enjoy just, like playing the combos out physically, I think for me it was a really big muscle memory thing. I think that there is a distinct difference between, you know, like running these combos on like Dueling Book. I guess back then it was like Dueling Network. No, that even existed. You know, like EDO Pro, Dueling Network, whatever, your Master Duel. I think there's a big difference between like, you know, clicking and dragging versus like actually, you know, holding the cards in your hand, playing them, setting them in the grave, picking them up, shuffling them, all that stuff. For me at least, it was just such a it felt good. Just kind of, it's more organic. It helped me get used to, you know, like where to set cards. Like when you activate stuff now, like you have to worry about like imperm and stuff. But even back then, just kind of the idea of like, you know, placing the cards down correctly, keeping your board organized. I don't know, stuff like that really helped me out. It just helped me visualize myself at the table in tournament, even when I wasn't in tournament. So I could sit in front of my desk and like still kind of do it and play out game states and stuff physically with the cards in hand, as opposed to just reading about them or just imagining the scenarios in my head. I think, again, that can apply today. I feel like, obviously, testing online is good, and it's a great resource for the testing part. And you can, of course, do, like, Dueling Book free play and stuff. But I always would recommend, you know, picking up the cards yourself, too, and kind of just running the combos, because there's just something about, like, you know, when you are forced to sit at the tournament table that just can feel a little bit different. It can cause you to maybe forget something you've been practicing. So I think doing a little bit of that really goes a long way. My next thing would be let it all play out when you're new, at least. So what I mean by this is don't give up. Like, never scoop games. When you're new, I think you should always just let the game ride out. Like, if you think your opponent's got you beat, let them, you know, do it. Like, let them play out their thing. See exactly how it is that they beat you, exactly what it is their deck did. Or if you think that you're just falling behind, but you might be able to make a comeback, play it out, particularly in playtesting sessions, but even just like in tournaments. Again, I think this is something that, you know, once you're more seasoned in the game, there are like strategic times when it's maybe best to scoop and like go to game 2 for time reasons or whatever. But I think that when you're new, it's just important to get all the experience and see everything that there is to see. I would also say this is important if you're playing like at a tournament, especially like a regional. If you paid to enter it, even if you're like beyond the point of maybe getting a top, like typically a regional, let's say a regional is like 8 rounds. And so if you go X3, then you might want to drop because it's like, oh, well, I can't top. I think you should still play it out. I think still, you know, assuming that you're not like with a group that's like all dropped and leaving, play out all your rounds. Even if you won't top, you know, you get the experience, you paid to be here, you might as well get your time and money's worth. You might get to experience some different matchups. You get some more practice with your deck. You can have more informed decisions when it comes to like what you know, change and all of that. And yeah, so I think that just like letting games play out, watching them kind of you know, play to completion is important. I used to do that a lot. I would never like give up games. I would always kind of like just see. I was a bright-eyed kid, of course, but I would always try to see like, okay, how exactly did my opponent, you know, completely defeat me? So yeah, that's just something that I would say more people need to do. I sometimes see people just like give up automatically and just sort of start complaining or whatever. Which brings me to my last one. Less complain, more adapt. Honestly, that applies to pretty much getting like better at most things. It's not to say that, you know, there aren't annoying ass cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Trust me, we all know there are. I mean, hell, I complain about them like every other day on this channel. But I think when it comes to actually like trying to improve at the game, don't lose yourself too much in like what things ought to be like, or how like unfair this card is, or that it needs to be banned. Like, sure, maybe it does, but until it's banned, it's legal, which means you're gonna have to deal with it. Either you can use it, you can play against it, whatever, you can adapt to it. But there are so many things where, you know, you can lose to stuff and get angry and just think that the card's dumb. But, you know, do some self-reflection, right? Like something that I sort of like to do. Sometimes I would record my games. This isn't really, it's kind of an impractical thing. But like sometimes I would bring the camera to locals and actually ask if I could like record matches, and I would go back and like rewatch my games. Because sometimes like if you lose to a Mirror Force, for instance, that was one of the big cards back in the day, right? No one really plays it anymore. But like if I lost to Mirror Force, I'd be like, okay, so I should have switched a monster to defense position at this point, and then it's attacked with the other one, and that would have been safer against Mirror Force. And then if I did get hit, I would be able to come back and all this stuff. Same with those like other blowout cards like Torrential Tribute. So I do actually feel like some of that's relevant today. Like, you know, against maybe a card like Lightning Storm, for instance, you can place like your boss monsters in defense mode, especially if you're going first, so that you don't lose to say Lightning Storm. That's just a simplified example, but you get the picture. So Yeah, don't just assume that the card that beat you is completely unfair. Assume that maybe you could have perhaps played around it and you maybe even put yourself in a position where the card can beat you that you don't have to do. Yeah, so anyways, those are the 5 tips that I would give to new players. At least it's stuff that worked for me. Like I said, could be totally different for other people. You guys, anybody who's getting into the game now, I think that it's honestly great that you are, because there are way more resources. There's a lot more videos on technical play. There's a lot more sources for deck lists. There's a lot better, just everything, really. So much stuff has been documented, and there's so much coverage for tournaments now. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful, maybe reassuring, maybe get you off on the right foot. If it did, drop a like and leave a comment. Maybe let me know, what was it like for you when you started playing? If you're like one of the more veteran people, or if you're new, what are other things you would like to know? Maybe you can also help someone else in the comments. It can be a learning experience. It can be fun. All right, that's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Subscribe to APS Amplifier. Bastard.